Nearly half of young employees at large Japanese companies say the same thing. There's a man in their office who does no real work and he still gets paid. A Nisen ni Shruk survey by the consulting firm Shikigaku asked workers in their 20s and 30s at major firms whether their company had an old guy who doesn't work. 49.2% said yes.
That man has a name in Japanese: madogiwazoku, the window tribe. He's usually in his late 50s or 60s, kept at a desk near the window, answering the occasional email and collecting a salary that has almost nothing to do with what he produces. He isn't a glitch in the system. He's the system working exactly as designed.
For 70 years, the core promise of a Japanese corporate career was called nenko, joretsu, pay and rank that rise automatically with age and tenure, almost independent of individual performance. Picture a Western company where your raise schedule is set the day you're hired and barely moves no matter how good or bad you turn out to be. That was standard practice across corporate Japan, and it built the post-war economic miracle. Now, in Nisen ni Strix, the companies that built the system are the ones tearing it down.
Nenko joretsu wasn't an accident of culture. It was an engineering solution to a specific post-war problem, a labor shortage so severe that companies needed a way to stop workers from jumping to competitors mid-career. Pair guaranteed lifetime employment with pay that only grows if you stay, and job hopping stops making financial sense.
Add enterprise unions organized around each individual company rather than each industry, and you get what economists call the three sacred treasures of Japanese employment: lifetime jobs, seniority pay, and company-loyal unions, working together to lock in a stable, obedient workforce for exactly as long as the country needed one.
The clearest signal came in January, when Fujitsu CEO Takahito Tokita gave an interview that quietly ended a 70-year tradition. Starting in fiscal Nisen ni Struk, Fujitsu will stop hiring its entire graduating class on one day in one spring intake at one uniform starting salary. Instead, the company will hire year-round, and pay will be set by the job itself, not by the calendar or the clock.
We need to pay appropriately in order to compete globally, Tokita told reporters, explaining that Fujitsu can no longer afford to pay a promising AA engineer the same starting wage as everyone else in their cohort.
Fujitsu isn't first, and that's the more interesting part of this story. KDDI began shifting mid-career hires onto a job-based pay system back in Nisen ni, then extended it to its entire general workforce in Nisen ni It. The company broke its roles into fakuo-san distinct jobs across 30 professional domains and started scoring people on achievement and ability instead of age. The results show up in who gets promoted as of April Nisen ni Sen. KDDI had Nippak-Hatch-san managers under the age of 40, 2.6 times as many as it had just 3 years earlier.
Hitachi moved even earlier, introducing what it calls the Hitachi Global Grade System back in Nisen Shiti, explicitly redefining jobs by the size of the role rather than the seniority of the person filling it.
By the time the Japanese government got involved, it wasn't leading a movement, it was catching up to one. In August Nisen Yursin, the Cabinet Secretariat, the Trade Ministry, and the Labor Ministry jointly published a job-type HER guideline, compiling case studies from 20 companies including Fujitsu and KDDI, and encouraging the rest of corporate Japan to follow. The goal, stated plainly in the document, was to shift career planning from something companies impose on employees to something employees drive themselves, choosing their own skills, their own moves, their own value.
So why is this happening now, after 70 years? 3 forces are converging at once. The first is demographic math. Japan's labor force could be short 11 million workers by Nusing Mushin, and a quarter of Japanese citizens over Lukshivu are already employed, the second highest rate among major economies after South Korea. When you can't count on an endless supply of 22-year-olds to keep the seniority pyramid growing, paying strictly by tenure stops being affordable.
The second is a straight-up bidding war for scarce skills. AA engineers,
Data scientists and consultants who can walk into a foreign firm for double the salary a nenko schedule would ever offer them in their 30s. The third is trust. According to Minavi's survey data, only 31% of new Japanese hires now say they want to stay at one company until retirement. The generation the seniority system was built to keep loyal has stopped believing the deal will be honored.
That's the real story hiding inside the madogiwazoku statistic. Nenko joretsu was never really a pay scale. It was a deferred compensation contract. Employees accepted modest pay in their 20s and 30s in exchange for a promised stay, and the company will overpay you later once you're senior. The window seat worker isn't a broken employee. He's a creditor collecting on a debt his employer signed decades ago. What's happening at Fujitsu, KDDI, and Hitachi is that debt being renegotiated, and this time it's the employer walking away from the table first.
That renegotiation doesn't land evenly. For a 20-something engineer with in-demand AI or data skills, job-based pay is a straightforward win. Get paid what the market says you're worth, starting on day one, instead of waiting until age 45. For the generalist mid-career employee who spent 2 decades rotating through departments exactly the way the old system asked, it's a different story. The skills that made you valuable under nenko joretsu, broad company knowledge, internal relationships, patience, don't map cleanly onto a job description with a market price attached.
90% of the young workers in that same Shikigaku survey said the current arrangement actively hurts morale, workload, and cost, which is exactly the resentment that gives companies political cover to dismantle it. Japan spent 70 years building a system where loyalty was rewarded on a 30-year delay. It's now discovering that the delay itself was the flaw, and it's rebuilding the entire architecture of how 40 million salaried workers get paid, one company at a time.
If you want to keep up with stories like this, subscribe to the Japan Factor. The seniority system took 70 years to build. The next question is how long the company's still clinging to it. The regional banks, the manufacturers, the trading houses that haven't announced a single reform, can hold out before the labor market makes the decision for them.